passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Franchise Euphoria. Today, I'm thrilled to have Bob Burg on the show for a second time. Bob is a sought-after speaker at company leadership and sales conferences, sharing the platform with everyone from today's business leaders and broadcast personalities to even a former United States president. Bob is the author of a number of books on sales, marketing, and influence, with total book sales well over 1 million copies. His book, The Go-Giver, co-authored by John David Mann, has sold over 500,000 copies, and it has been translated into 21 languages. It is now being released in a new expanded edition with a foreword by Huffington Post founder and publisher Arianna Huffington. Bob was a previous guest on Franchise Euphoria, episode 118, and I am thrilled to have him back today. Hello and welcome back, Bob.
Hey, Josh, it's great to be with you always. How are you?
I am doing fantastic. Well, as you know, in our previous conversations that we've had and through the wonders of social media, I'm a big fan of The Go-Giver.
Oh, thank you.
Most people in the circles that I run with are very well attuned to it and have read it oftentimes many times over. But for the one or two people who may not know of it, can you provide a quick synopsis of the premise of The Go-Giver?
Sure. The book itself is a business parable, so it's a story, co-authored with the amazing John David Mann, who was really the lead writer and storyteller. As you know, Josh, I'm much more of a how-to guy, as far as step 1, step 2, step 3. While John can do that, he also happens to be a magnificent storyteller, so it was a good collaboration. And really, the premise is simply that shifting one's focus from getting to giving, and when we say giving in this context, we simply mean constantly and consistently providing value to others, and that doing so is not only a nice way to live life, but a very financially profitable way as well. And the story centers around Joe, who's a young, up-and-coming, aggressive, good guy, but just has his priorities in the wrong place. His focus is really on himself and who owes what to him and what people can do for him, as opposed to understanding that if you really want to make it in this world, both personally and business, you've really got to shift your focus from an I focus or a me focus to an other focus, looking for ways to add value to other people's lives.
So is this a book that you would classify as being focused towards entrepreneurs, or have you found it to be universally applied across many fields?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because, we wrote it, I think, with the entrepreneur in mind, but we've got many traditional corporate businesses who use this, within their organizations, many franchise organizations, direct selling organizations, and even schools and religious institutions and book clubs are using it. So I think what happened is it started with that sort of entrepreneurial niche and then broadened its scope as more people heard about the book.
Well, yeah, I mean, it seems to have some universal and timeless principles, and you mentioned the magic word for this show, franchise. Obviously here at the Franchise Euphoria show, we focus on helping people in the franchise arena. And
right,
I guess this is sort of a broad question, but I think it would be instructive for folks who are listening. And that is, for someone looking to incorporate these concepts from the Go-Giver into their franchise business, where would be a good place to start?
Well, it all starts with law number 1, the law of value, which says your true worth is determined by how much more you give in value than you take in payment, which, and I think we talked about this last time, that can be very easily misconstrued when you hear that, give more in value than I take in payment. Aren't I going to go broke that way? No, just the opposite, because there's a huge difference between price and value, where price is a dollar amount, the dollar figure that you charge, Value is the relative worth or desirability to a person. It's the relative worth or desirability of the thing itself to the end user or beholder. In other words, what is it about what you sell that brings with it first, intrinsically, just by the very nature of what it is, such great value or worth to a person that they will willingly exchange their money or their time, energy, what have you, for it, and feel great about it while you make a very healthy profit. So, and remember, the only reason someone's going to buy from you is because they believe they are getting more in value than what they're paying for it in price. Otherwise, why would they make the decision to buy? So while the price they pay is finite, the value is infinite. The value is limitless. It's the entire experience that you provide. It's the excellence, the consistency, the attention, the empathy, the appreciation, the way you make that person feel throughout the buying experience. That's really what's truly of value to them, along with the intrinsic value of the product or service itself.
Now, you had mentioned you co-wrote this with John David Mann. I'm just curious, who came up with the concept of it? Did you bring the concept to him or vice versa?
Originally, I brought the idea to him only because I had a book out years ago called Endless Referrals, in which the major theme was that all things being equal, people will do business with and refer business to those people they know, like, and trust. And because I was such a big fan of the parable genre, I really wanted to kind of have a book where we could take that basic principle and put it into story form. But it took me about a minute of trying to write it to realize that there's a huge difference between writing a how-to book, which is what all my other books had been, and writing a parable, a fictional story. So I asked John, and when I say asked, I mean begged and pleaded with him to be the lead writer and storyteller. And so I got together with him and his wife, his fiance at the time, now his wife, and we had dinner. Because they happened to be in Florida visiting her mom. And I went over the basic, just the basic outline, the idea that I had. And he took it back. And about 3 weeks later, he called me and said, Anna and I were looking over this. We might just have something here. So, I very coolly said, oh, good, thank you. Well, I look forward to working with you. And when I hung up the phone, I went, yeah, he's going to do it. Because I knew that he could really make it sing.
That's fantastic. No, I mean, the power of storytelling, right?
Oh,
I mean, it's the best way I've ever found, and I think most people find, to get a point across. I mean, it's one thing to go and tell people about facts and statistics, but if you can tell it through a story, they really soak it in.
Well, something John says that I think is really true, that there's the old saying that, facts tell, stories sell. But what John says that I really like, which is just a little bit different, is that stories themselves don't necessarily sell, but what they do is they connect. And it's only after that connection has been made in the person's mind that you can then sell your idea to them. And that's why, as a franchise owner, it's still about the relationship. It's not about the product or service. And how do they look at you? How do they think of you? What do they think of when they come into your place of business, or however it happens to be that they first meet you? What kind of relationship are you establishing? In a sense, what is your story? What is it that you really have to offer them?
How do you think relationship and relationship building and giving value has changed with the use of social media? I mean, you and I are very much involved in social media, and most people are at these times, right? And it's going to continue. And it's just sort of interesting to me because in the franchise context, you almost see a little bit of a pushback from franchisors where they're trying to maintain control over their brands. So they're real hesitant to give that control up to their local owner operators from a social media perspective. But I'm curious from your angle, how has social media affected or impacted the whole relationship building exercise that's so necessary for building a good, strong business?
Well, first, it allows you to connect with people who you otherwise may not have had a chance to connect with. And that's so key. And really, the franchisors who allow themselves to give up some of that control and let the franchisee connect with their local customers, those are the ones that actually profit the most. It's not a matter, and people learn very quickly, people who are in any kind of business, franchises included, that it's not a matter of just posting what special you have up there. That's an announcement, okay? But the goal is to really connect with the people in your community, which means you're constantly providing value as that other person understands that value to be. So by all means, when you get on Twitter or whatever, let's say, or Facebook, and connect with those people who you find out are local, but don't do it from the aspect of your particular store or shop or whatever. Connect with them from where they are and provide information that's going to entertain them, that's going to help them, that's going to give them valuable information. Then at that point, once you have the connection, in other words, once the story's been told, now you can every so often put out a message that gives them some information on why they should come to your store now. But it's basically the connection you make on a personal level, not a business level, that's going to turn into the business level.
So entrepreneurs, franchisees, franchise owners, franchisors, are all very, very busy people running around doing a lot of different things. And, giving people, a lot of times these are very giving people, right? They want to go out and give, and they receive, of course. Mm-hmm. With this concept, a lot of times people, and I put myself in this category, people who give of themselves will oftentimes experience momentary burnout because they don't know how to turn off the spigot, as they say. How can somebody who's a giver by nature do so in a way that will benefit their business and not ultimately burn them out by them sort of extending themselves too far too often?
Well, being a go-giver should never, ever, and that's a great question, by the way. I'm so glad you asked that. Being a go-giver should never be misconstrued as being self-sacrificial or being a doormat or being a martyr. Okay. And so if you're doing things in such a way that if you're giving value to others in such a way that you feel you're denying yourself something or being taken advantage of or burning out, what you want to do is revisit what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Well, that's really, and I think that's a concept that people really need to hone in on, because again, a lot of times people will perceive giving as something that is like just sacrificial on your end, as opposed to part of a strategy of really giving and receiving, mm-hmm. but giving to where you are building that relationship, and that to me is one of the most important points from the go-giver. So.
Yes, well, thank you. And that's why it is a personal thing. And that's why, because value, which again we define as the relative worth or desirability of a thing, of something, to the end user, right, or beholder, which means that value is always in the eyes of the beholder. It's not what you or what I or what we think should be of value or what we think others should think of as value. It's getting into their head and serving them and providing value to them in a way they see it as being of value. And that's how the relationship is really built.
Do you believe humans are really predisposed to giving as opposed to just taking? I mean, I happen to believe that they are. I mean, I look at it from a very optimistic perspective, but I could see there's probably a contingent out there that would say just the opposite of that. I'm curious your thoughts on that.
No, you can actually go way back to the cave person days and see that both giving and receiving were something that was necessary for survival. You had to be able to give because you had to be of value to others in the tribe. Okay. And so, yeah, giving was something that, of course, as parents, it's very natural that you give to your children. As human beings, it's very natural that you give of yourself to others, which doesn't mean everyone wants to do it, but all in all, it is generally a part of us. We also had to be able to receive, or we wouldn't have eaten, we wouldn't have survived. And although, of course, we don't have the same same life and death situations as our forebears did back in the cave person days. It has been over these hundreds of millions of years wired into our DNA. And so, yes, we actually do. We are predisposed to give. And we're predisposed to receive, which is great, because both are important. Giving and receiving are simply two sides of the very same coin. They work together.
So one of the things about The Go-Giver that I so appreciate is that, it's more than just a book about providing value and receiving something in return. It's very much about mentorship. It's about influence, about leadership. And I'm curious, for those out there, and sort of we're all seeking mentorship. I don't think there's ever a moment where I've ever not had a mentor of some sort or been a mentor to somebody else. What would you recommend to somebody who's seeking mentorship? Or I guess maybe a better question is, what should an up-and-comer not do when they're seeking out mentorship?
Well, yeah, that's a good question too, because what you see a lot of times is that someone will reach out to someone else, to someone they'd like to mentor them, and they'll say something like, "Hey, would you be my mentor?" Or "Can I ask you to be my mentor?" And when you ask that of someone who you don't have any kind of relationship with, but maybe you've studied their work or you've admired them or what have you, basically, it can come across to that person as though you're really saying, "Hey, would you, share with me your 40 years of business and just kind of let me know everything you've ever done to be successful and let me ride on your coattails." And it's not that people who are very successful don't want to share themselves or give of themselves. Some don't, but a lot of them do and want to be a mentor to someone. But they probably don't want to be asked like that, because it's all, in that case, it sounds like, the person asking is just looking to take. And so what I would do is I would look at obtaining a mentor as something of building a relationship with someone, just like you wouldn't ask someone to be married, to marry you. You'd ask them for the first date. And I think a mentor-protege relationship is like that too. It's much more appropriate to let a person know that you've admired their work, and that you would like, if they feel it's appropriate, if you could ask one or two very specific questions of them. I would also make sure that you read or study everything you can about them first, so that you don't ask questions that you should know the answers to, that are already out there all over the internet or something. So you're really providing value to them in that way when you're letting them know through action that you're not going to waste their time, that you respect them and you respect their time. And again, you have very specific questions for them. And then once they answer those questions and you send them a personalized handwritten note thanking them and letting them know you'll put their advice to good use, maybe you can, and it's very easy to find out over the internet what someone's favorite charity is, and maybe make a small donation in their name, which of course they'll be notified. And again, it's not that you're trying to get brownie points. It's that you're letting them know that you respect the process, that you're looking to give to the degree that you can. You're looking to give value to them. If you ever find out something about them, that, their alma mater, and you hear something about it that was interesting, or someone you can introduce them to, or who knows, there's all sorts of ways. We can't give value to a mentor to the degree they can give it to us, of course. That's why we want them to be our mentor and we're the protege, but we can look for ways to provide value to them in some way, which again communicates to them that you're a serious person and that you respect their time and you respect the process. And then as this happens, and you come back and you can ask another question, and the relationship continues. Now, after a while, it's maybe developed into a mentor-protege relationship, but you've earned that and you've earned it through building a relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting. I find that it's always the little things that matter. I mean, I know certainly all the mentors I've had in my life, I've never once reached out to somebody and said, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" I've just developed a relationship,
exactly,
and shown an intentionality about it. And I now know, people who will reach out to me in certain instances and look to get mentorship in different aspects is always the individuals who sort of I can tell they're being intentional and they're doing those extra little things that now I want to give more of myself
Right.
to them.
Right, exactly. I think you make a great point when you use the term intentional. It's just it's developing organically, if you will, but it does develop.
Well, one of the things that all business owners, I think, want to ultimately do as part of owning and building a successful business is to gain influence and develop their leadership. How can the go-giver help a business owner develop influence and leadership in their craft?
Well, so much, when you think of it, what is influence really? On a very basic level, influence can be defined as the ability to move a person or persons to a desired action, usually within the context of a specific goal. And while that definition works, I don't think it's the essence of leadership. Influence is really about pull. It's not about push, right? You don't hear people say, well, that Josh, he is such a great influencer. He has a lot of push with people. He is really pushy. Wow, what a great influencer. No, influence is much more about pull. It's an attraction. Great influencers attract people to themselves and to their ideas. And this pull we're discussing about is really a very legitimate form of power, which is the opposite of force, right? Because force is about manipulation, intimidation. It's about control. And people don't want to be influenced that way. And in fact, when you try and influence through compliance, which you can do sometimes, but when you do, people generally are going to do only what they have to do and not one bit more. Not to mention, often they will try to sabotage even what they have to do, whether they sabotage it consciously or unconsciously. I think the greatest influencers, they influence through earning others' commitment. And you earn others' commitment through, and I think in Dale Carnegie's classic, How to Win Friends and Influence People, what I believe was his underlying premise was when he said, and I thought this statement was so brilliant, he wrote, ultimately, people do things for their reasons, not our reasons. And so the great influencers are constantly questioning themselves. They're asking, how does what I'm asking this person to do align with their goals, their wants, their needs, their desires? How does what I want this other human being to do, how does that align with their values? And I think when we ask ourselves these questions thoughtfully, intelligently, genuinely, authentically, not as a way to manipulate another person into doing our will, but as a way to build everyone in the process, we've come a lot closer to earning that kind of commitment. And there's a huge difference between compliance and commitment. My good friend and one of my mentors, Dondi Scumaci, has a great saying about this. She says, when it comes to leadership, when it comes to influence, compliance will never take you where commitment can go. And I think that's so key to understand.
Well, Bob, that's fantastic. I mean, it seems to me in this day and age that we live in, with all the distractions and all the being bombarded with a lot of different messages, it seems that how you win the day is just exactly like you said. I mean, you put out something that is going to be of value to somebody else, and they may not be ready at that time, but when they are, you will be first in mind for them to find your services. It very much cuts across marketing and other aspects of business. And certainly this day and age, we have many ways to reach people, but we also have many ways to block people out. So it's bringing in, like you said, bringing people to your cause as opposed to forcing them into something seems to be the smart way to go.
Oh, thank you.
Well, listen, Bob, it's been fantastic, as it was last time, and the time has flown by. I really think that there's a lot of value in this new addition to the Go Giver, certainly with Ariana Huffington adding a little bit at the beginning in your Q&A and discussion. So where can people go and get that?
They can either get it right at Amazon.com or their local bookseller, or BarnesandNoble.com, or they can come to my website, which is Burg, Burg, burg.com. And while they're there, they can, if they'd like, subscribe to my Influence and Success Insights, get chapter 1 of the book, or just look for the link right on the site that brings them to where they can buy the book.
Well, fantastic. Thank you again for your time and your wisdom, and best of luck to you in the future. And I look forward to staying in touch, Bob.
Josh, I always love speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Hopefully this was helpful for you today. If you are in the market for a franchise, I would highly encourage you to check out my free ebook, which is What to Know Before You Buy a Franchise. You can head over to my website at that's INDY, franchiselaw.com, and download it there for free. And let me know what you think. If you're enjoying this podcast, if you're enjoying the value that you're getting from this podcast, I'd also invite you to go to iTunes and provide me with a rating and review. It always helps for visibility on the podcast. So thank you so much for your support, and hope this episode was helpful to you.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.